Our next speaker is no stranger to Meniga. Danielle Neben has served on the board of directors of Meniga for some years now. She has more than 20 years of experience in banking, spanning 8 countries. Former HSBC executive, Danielle is now responsible for bringing Alipay to Iceland in her current role as marketing director of ePassi Iceland. As I mentioned before, that's one of many roles that she is having today. She's going to talk about the importance of diversity in banking, followed by a panel discussion on the same topic. Please join me in welcoming Danielle.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone at Meniga, Georg and Eleni, and there's so many people who have actually made this fantastic conference today, and I know I'm the last one, so you'll need to bear with me, but I have some very important messages to deliver. But I just want to say, I worked at HSBC for 20 years in 7 countries, and in my last role, the CEO of the country had said, Danielle, you're going to go to Iceland, and after 5 years, you're going to leave because you'll be bored. Well, I'm certainly not bored. This is probably one of the most exciting conferences I've attended with regards to fintech and banking, and I think there's a lot more to come, and there's a lot more talent to come from Iceland, so it's a real privilege to be part of it. So today I'm going to put on my other hat, which has been, I've been very involved in FK, the Association of Women Business Leaders here in Iceland. And I wanted to bring and talk to you a little bit about diversity, what it means here in Iceland, and what it can mean within your organizations as well, because I think there's a really big secret that's been kept from you. So if I take the clicker, that'll help. So I want to talk to you about 3 topics. One, because you are here, we have so many international guests. A bit of background on Iceland. And myself, I'm Canadian, married to an Icelander. I mean, I live here, ég tala íslensku, and I absolutely love it. I think we've got some great things to show in terms of female leadership in Iceland. What we've been doing at the Association of Women Business Leaders to promote diversity within corporations and companies, and how this is applicable diversity in fintech and in banking. So this was a start. This is one of the first women here. She was the first suffragette in Iceland, and she was actually the founder of Icelandic Women's Rights Association, Bríet Bjarnhéðinsdóttir. This association is still around today and is very strong and has really set the tone for Iceland being actually the leader in gender equality throughout the world. In 1975, there was the Icelandic women's strike, and everybody, all the women in Iceland, went on strike at exactly 2:05 in the afternoon, because that was the percentage of loss of salary versus their male counterparts, and it really stopped the nation. We just had the latest strike that happened on the 24th of October, and can you imagine, it's just gone from 2:05 in the afternoon to 2:55 p.m. And there's still a long way to go. And even though Iceland has passed the first equal pay legislation around the world, there is still a lag in terms of pay gap. And this is also, what has also been raised at the last strike is also about Me Too. And I'd see there is definitely a link between the two, and seeing how can we actually promote more women within the organizations to address these issues. This woman is the absolute treasure of Iceland. She's the first democratically elected woman president in the world. And not only was she the first elected woman president in the world, she also did it as a single divorced mom of an adopted child. And talk about, really different views of who leaders can be. And she's still around today. I've met her on many occasions, and absolute inspiration for us all women to go forward. So I'm part of this Association of Women Business Leaders. It's about 1,300 women from all types of industry here in Iceland. And our vision is really that the Icelandic economy is characterized by diversity and is exemplary. There are 3 key roles that we look at and that are very important. The first one is networking. We do 50 to 70 events every year. So we meet up, we learn about training, entrepreneurship, how can we actually get grants, sharing information and knowledge. We also do golf. We go do international visits, local visits, and the biggest thing that we always get back in terms of what our members want is networking, to meet others and to be able to leverage and to promote and do what the guys have done really well over the last centuries. The other one is we promote diversity and to provide visibility, because visibility is so important for women to actually get promotions, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, in the arts. It's important to get that visibility so people can see and know, to be known. There are three major projects that they're actually globally leading. The first one is FKA supported and pushed very hard for legislation to have 40% quota of women in boards where there are over 50 employees. And this does bring a lot of diversity, and there's a lot of talent pool to go get there. But even with this 40% requirement, we're only at 35% in Iceland. So there's still work to be done. And this is why the Icelandic voice is so strong and so important that we don't continue, we don't just say, okay, it's all been done, so not to give up. The other one is women in media, is to promote to have more women, because today only a third of interviewees are women. And then if you look at the different types of news types, in the business, it's even less. For older women, it's almost zero in certain news. So how do we promote women in media? And the third is leadership equality. In Iceland, for all the listed companies that we have, there are no female CEOs. The women graduates over the last 20 years, it's about 60% of all graduates, and yet we have less than 25% in executive positions. So there's still work to be done, and these are some of the major projects that FKA is undertaking, and some of them are globally leading. So if you think about diversity in fintech and banking, what is the definition of diversity? I think this is fantastic. It's not just about race or your cultural background. I think there are three key areas. The first one is you can have gender, or you can have different types of people, whether lesbian or gay, or if they're handicapped. What is it that they can bring to bring them in as well to the organizations, bring diversity? The second one is on culture, to bring different cultural backgrounds and perceptions. I think today, Barry, for example, from Africa, for me, it's just such a different world, and how to bank the unbanked. What are potential out there? And then, of course, the third one is the skill set. We need to make sure we have that skill set. And as was talked about today with Chris Skinner, that we need to ensure that we have the right people around the table to be running the business. And diversity pays. So this McKinsey research shows that if you have either gender diverse companies or a more culturally diverse companies, it will have a positive impact on the bottom line. And this is the secret. Because I worked at HSBC, so of course very much into Asia. I personally worked in Asia and Latin America and in Europe. And we always talk about China and India as the next potential. But the female economy is a huge potential and very much untapped. And this is just recently, there was some data that came out in the United Kingdom in terms of pay gap in financial institutions. And I have to say, having worked for HSBC, it's hard to see that, but I'm not surprised either, because at the top, there's still very male dominated. And this is why there's almost a 60% differential from women's salaries compared to men's salaries. And for bonuses, it's even worse, where they're 86% higher than the ones for women. But what I'm really happy about this is that we're starting to measure this data. And all of you in here, because you're all data scientists, you've got one there. If you can measure it, you can see it, and you can improve on it. And I think this can have a real impact in terms of how we're mirroring our customers. 50% of the population is women. So we should really be mirroring at the top. And by having those types of statistics, so these are things that I very much look forward to seeing developing. I don't know if you saw this recent news where Amazon's AI recruitment tool had been shut down because of gender discrimination. And earlier, I can't remember who it was, but it's I think it was Ewan who was saying, you're going to do your business, but it's actually what assumptions are you making to put into doing that business. And I think this is really important. Even myself, I searched for this picture online, Shutterstock. And I searched, for recruitment for men. But actually, under this title, it said good leadership. And I come across this quite a lot, actually, in online, where it's very male-oriented, even getting icons. There's so many different men icons that are available, but not female icons. So how are we thinking about, building our teams to be able to service this customer segment? I also follow very closely on LinkedIn, love watching, the different stories around the world. And there were two recently. There was one bank from Brazil that I know they were profiling their services in Asia. And there was another bank, very big bank in Southeast Asia and Singapore, and the whole panels were male. And that one from Singapore, it's a digital team. And then the man actually thanked 25 of his colleagues, and only 5 of them were women. So if we're thinking about, servicing this customer segment, what approach are we taking on it? So I think it's quite important in terms of also attracting the right type of talent around the table and bringing women into this conversation. The other big point that we talk a lot about in Iceland is actually, maternity versus paternity leave. It's such a taboo for men to go on paternity leave. But why is it that it needs to be left to the women to go on maternity leave? And it's the women who really suffer after when they come back because of the pay differentials. And this is also something to think about and promoting within your organizations, that this is actually equal in terms of raising our children in society and giving opportunity. So the female economy, women actually make a lot of the purchases. They make the purchasing decisions. Here we have bank accounts, but actually every single product that's on this slide are products that the banks offer. So how is it that we're addressing this? And it is said that actually women feel quite uncomfortable going around and shopping for their banking services. One little thing for myself, I have 2 kids, they're 12 and 9, and of all the banks I've banked with, none of them has sold me an investment product for my children for the future education. So I think this is my view because of course I have 2 kids. But what is out there that we can do that's different for this market segment? And do we actually really understand, coming from a male perspective, and the next slide is a bit of a shocker, but is this what we really want to see? Anyways, do we really understand the customer? Do we understand the positioning that we're putting towards them? And of course, we have such a range of customers. The other thing in finance, and I think because it's important in this conversation, because it's the conversation between the financial institutions as well as the fintechs, the startups. And the startups today, in this whole ecosystem, we have very little support for women startups. Only 3% were financed in the first quarter of this year. 9% together if there was a male co-founder. So the majority is actually going to men. And if we want to be able to bring in that voice of women back to help to actually identify and to service this segment, this is something to think about. And there are some really great initiatives that are out there as well. Goldman Sachs had pledged a fund, 500 million fund for female founders. But what I love is this picture, a little blurry because I stole it from Facebook. But the lady with the mic is Jenny. She's from Crowberry Capital. So there's a VC fund here in Iceland. And they're here today, and it is 3 women. And of course, they're investing in all types of businesses. It's not just going to be female focused, but there is a voice that's there. And Helga Valfes was telling me earlier, across Europe, only 8% of the decision makers who are in the VCs are women. But in Iceland, it's 47%. And I think this is where, the support in terms of the ecosystem is really important to bring that talent throughout these businesses. And the last slide, which I absolutely love, this was a quote I just saw from Christine Lagarde, where if Lehman Brothers had a bit more like Lehman Sisters, we wouldn't have maybe had the degree of tragedy that we had during the last financial crises. And I can say from some of my experience, I've been in Iceland for 5 years now, and I've been involved. I've been in the board of Landsbanki, and I've been following very closely what's been going on. And when the banks have been in the news for some not so good events, it's been very male-led versus the female-led banks. We have now 2 banks out of 3 that we have women CEOs. Bringing a different perspective, I think I met someone who does these expeditions to go to the Arctic. And he's gone on many expeditions with men and then took women. It took a bit more time. It was done differently, but they got there. And I think that's what women can bring into the table as well. So the next point, I don't know if there are any questions. How would I change banks to make them more diverse? Actually, I think we have the panel coming up. We can get some great answers to those questions.